Since the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the Western Wall has become the holiest site in the world for Jews. The wall is not the wall of the ancient temple, but instead the retaining wall built by Herod the Great. Its holiness comes from the fact that it is the closest part of that wall to where the Holy of Holies once stood. The Western Wall today is one of the greatest attractions in Israel, with 5 million visitors per year. What we'd like to do today is go back in time and examine this area of Jerusalem back in 1967 in honor of the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. So we're going to go back. This picture was taken by our friend Sherwood Burton, and I believe it shows the Western Wall in the time of the 70s. As you can see, you could actually drive in to park close to the wall. Certainly cannot do that today. And this is what the wall looked like prior to the 67 war. As you can see, it was a very narrow area, and the Jews had lost access to the Western Wall after the War of Independence in 1948. As part of the 50-year celebration of the reunification of Jerusalem, the government had brought out some of the archive photos that had not been so famous, but made large reproductions of them and put them up on some of the government buildings. I went on a particular tour on the 50th anniversary on that day and got to take photographs of some of these and hear some of the stories behind them. This particular photo is a photo of the soldiers rejoicing shortly after the reunification. Now this photo here shows Shlomo Goren. This is the famous rabbi that blew the shofar right at the Western Wall. There's a famous picture of that. But here he is rejoicing and kissing one of the army officers nearby. Only 2 days after the liberation of this Western Wall on June 7th was the very first wedding at the Western Wall. This was on June 9th, and here is a photograph. Now, because the space around the Western Wall was so constricted, immediately on June 10th, 3 days after the liberation, began the demolition and removal of all the objects in the way of the wall, all of the homes and rubble. As you see here, the wall is already being cleared out. Here is another shot of some religious Jews leaving their time of prayer at the Western Wall. Now, once they cleared that area around the Western Wall, if you were to stand at the Western Wall and look the other direction, you would be looking into what was originally the Jewish quarter before 1948. Now, we see on the right-hand side a building there called the Rothschild House, which housed about 1,000 Jews in that time before 1948. Now, of course, they had to evacuate during the War of Independence, and they lived after that in West Jerusalem on the west side of that green line of the Armistice Line, and so they had no access to the Old City at all. All of the Jewish quarter of the Old City was unavailable to the Jews for those 19 years, from 1948 to 1967. So after the War of Reunification of Jerusalem, the Jews rushed back in, of course, and looked and would see the destruction of what had happened to that Jewish quarter during those 19 years. And of course, there were things like there was Arabic written on the buildings, and there was various things done to it. So at the same time that there was great joy to be back, it was certainly a sense of the devastation that had been done to that sector by the Jordanians. Now we're going to listen to our tour guide tell a story.
And before we close a little story, the reason why we put up this exhibition is really because I think it's also it's a mission, it's a task to try and describe how exciting it was. And one of the nicest stories that I heard lately by a colleague of mine was about her grandfather. Apparently, well, she's a freak, she's a fan, a big fan of historical photographs. So naturally, she took her grandfather's collection of all the family events, everything that he documented throughout the years, and she sorted them out. She wanted to prepare him an album, and what she saw that he was very particular in taking 2 photographs from each event. You know, taking photographs back in the 40s and the 50s was an issue, okay? You don't have a lot of money, you don't have your little smartphone, you take it out as many as you would like. So each event, 2 photographs only, and all the family members that were in that family event were there, okay? No second chances. So she started going over all the photographs, and then she saw that there was one thing that was outstanding, and she saw a set of 5 photographs displaying the wall, okay? The wall of the old city. Now she didn't really understand what she was looking at because it was a bit blurry, and 5 photographs. He was very, very particular in taking 2 photographs only. So what's the story of the blurry 5 photographs? So she came to him and she asked him what was that all about, and he told her that when he came back, like everyone else, when he came back to the old city, it was such an incredible moment that he couldn't help himself. When he saw 2 Jewish soldiers standing on the wall, he just took out his camera and started taking photos until his wife told him, okay, that's enough. So that's the story of the blurry, unreasonable photographs that she saw. And maybe that's one of the nicest, the smallest but nicest examples of the feeling that swept over Jerusalem and over Israel on those first days, weeks and months after we got back to the Kotel.
All right, well, that is it. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at the Western Wall in 1967. And as we close out, let's go back to the Western Wall of today and see it in its beautiful form at night. And until next time, this is Bob Odell for Root Source saying Shalom.